The precisely calibrated gravity generators in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council struggled to maintain stability as dozens of alien dignitaries simultaneously leapt from their seats, their various appendages gesturing in horror at the main holoscreen. The image frozen there showed a human child no more than 7 standard solar cycles, executing what Sarah Chen knew to be a rather sloppy front kick in a white karate uniform. "Barbarism!" shrieked Representative Valork, their feather crests flaring crimson with distress. "They train their larvae for combat before they even develop secondary appendages." Sarah, Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, slowly lowered her face into her hands. She could feel a headache building behind her eyes as she recalled her morning briefing. "Whatever you do," her superior had said, fixing her with a stern look over his coffee mug, "don't show them the youth sports footage. They're still processing the concept of boxing from last month's cultural exchange." "What was I supposed to do?" she muttered into her palms. "They demanded to see our martial traditions after someone leaked that clip of the UFC." A crystalline tinkling sound drew her attention. Councillor Zixathiax, their crystalline form catching the chamber's light in rainbow patterns, had apparently reached their tolerance threshold. They toppled backward with a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane, their aide rushing forward with a cushion just a moment too late. "Order! Order!" High Chancellor Pixtar's resonant voice boomed through the chamber, all 6 of their eye stalks swiveling independently to track the various sources of chaos. "Ambassador Chen, you will explain why your species considers it appropriate to—" They consulted their datapad, mandibles clicking in disgust. "Belt test your young." Sarah straightened in her hover seat, fighting to keep her expression diplomatic rather than letting the laughter bubbling up in her chest escape. The situation was already precarious enough without her giving in to her inappropriate sense of humor. "Honorable Council," she began, using her best, soothing diplomat voice, "what you're seeing is not military training. It's a recreational activity called karate. It's meant to build confidence, discipline, and—" "Look!" interrupted Minister Globethor, their gelatinous form quivering with agitation as they jabbed a pseudopod at the screen. "The adult instructor is clearly demonstrating killing techniques." The holoscreen now showed Sensei Mike, a middle-aged man with a dad bod and a perpetually cheerful expression, slowly demonstrating proper form for a basic kata to a group of attentive children. "That's not a killing technique," Sarah sighed. "That's literally just teaching them how to stand properly and—" A new wave of pandemonium swept the chamber as the footage continued, showing 2 children sparring with foam padding and headgear. Several council members began producing their species equivalent of distress sounds, ranging from high-pitched whistles to subsonic rumbles that made Sarah's teeth vibrate. "They pit their young against each other in ritual combat," screeched someone from the upper tiers. "Is this how you select your leaders?" demanded another voice. "Do the victors consume the defeated?" asked a particularly worried-looking fungoid being. Sarah glanced at her watch. Not even 10 a.m. Earth Standard Time, and she was already dealing with an interstellar diplomatic incident. She made a mental note to request hazard pay for this session. "If you'll all just calm down for a moment," she tried again, raising her voice over the cacophony. "I can explain everything. You see, humans actually do this for— The rest of her sentence was drowned out by renewed chaos as the footage reached the belt promotion ceremony. The sight of children breaking boards with their bare hands proved too much for the already stressed council members. As Sarah watched 3 different species simultaneously attempt to evacuate the chamber through the same door, she couldn't help but wonder how they'd react when they discovered professional wrestling. After the initial chaos subsided and Councillor Zixathiax was successfully reoriented to their proper crystalline alignment, the Grand Chamber settled into what Sarah recognized as their emergency crisis mode. This mainly involved a lot of tentacle wringing, mandible clicking, and the formation of no fewer than 3 subcommittees. "We must understand the full scope of this. High Chancellor Pixtar's eye stalks wobbled with barely contained concern. "This systematic combat conditioning of your species." "Really, it's not that serious," Sarah insisted. "Humans just enjoy—" "Professor Blurp," Pixtar interrupted, causing Sarah to slump in her seat with a quiet groan. "You will head our investigation." The gelatinous form of Professor Blurp undulated forward from the sociology section. Sarah had met them during the great coffee confusion of last year. Apparently, caffeine had some interesting effects on amorphous life forms. The professor's translucent body currently displayed swirling patterns of academic excitement, with little sparkles of what Sarah recognized as their species equivalent of, "I'm about to write a paper about this." "Most fascinating subject matter," Blurp bubbled enthusiastically, their vocoder translating the ripples in their membrane into standard galactic. "I have already begun preliminary research into Earth's warrior traditions. Did you know they have something called Ninja Warrior, which appears to be an elaborate obstacle course designed to create the ultimate assassins?" Sarah pinched the bridge of her nose. That's a game show, Professor. It's entertainment." "Ah yes," Blurp's surface rippled knowingly. "Like your WWE, the Ritual Combat Theatre. Very clever disguise for training programs." "No, you don't understand. It's literally just for—" "We must investigate personally," Blurp announced, their form quivering with academic fervor. "I propose a covert observation mission to Earth's combat training centers." The council chamber erupted in concerned murmuring. The last covert observation mission to Earth had ended with 3 alien observers becoming TikTok celebrities after being mistaken for particularly convincing cosplayers at a convention. "I have already prepared disguises," Blurp continued proudly, their form shifting to display what appeared to be a PowerPoint presentation. Some things, Sarah mused, were truly universal. "Behold!" The holoscreen filled with what had to be the worst attempt at human disguises Sarah had ever seen. Blurp had apparently based their designs on workout videos from the 1980s, complete with neon spandex and sweatbands. "Professor," Sarah tried desperately, "I really don't think—" "I volunteer for the mission," came a chiming voice. Councillor Zixothiax had apparently recovered their courage, their crystalline form glowing with determination. "My species' natural faceting will blend perfectly with what humans call bling." "Excellent," Blurp bubbled. "And Minister Globthor, your ability to change colors will be invaluable." The gelatinous minister's form shifted to a proud purple. "I have been practicing human athletic phrases. Observe. Do you even lift, bro?" Sarah buried her face in her hands as the council chamber descended into an impromptu demonstration of what the various alien species thought human gym-goers sounded like. "I will crush your gains. Witness my sick reps, fellow protein consumer. Let us engage in the sacred art of leg day." "The investigation team will depart immediately," High Chancellor Pastar declared, their eye stalks now sporting tiny sweatbands. "Ambassador Chen will accompany you to ensure proper cultural context." "But," Sarah started, "and to prevent another incident like the hot yoga misunderstanding of last month." Sarah shuddered at the memory. They'd only just finished repairs on that studio. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in the parking lot of World Gym, watching as Professor Blurp attempted to pour their amorphous form into a pair of neon yellow running shorts and a tank top that read, "Suns out, guns out." Councillor Zixothiax had covered their crystalline form in what appeared to be every piece of workout gear they could find, resulting in a walking advertisement for Lululemon. Minister Globthor had taken the shape of what they clearly thought was a bodybuilder, but looked more like a water balloon that had been squeezed in the middle. "Remember," Sarah briefed them, fighting to keep her voice steady, "you're just here to observe. No sampling the protein shakes, no attempting to challenge the alpha human, and absolutely no trying to absorb the essence of victory from the sweat puddles this time." "But how will we understand their combat rituals without participating?" Blurp asked, their shorts slowly sliding through their form to pool at their feet. "We have studied Earth media extensively," Zixothiax chimed in, their various accessories jingling with every movement. "We know to shout, 'Let's get ready to rumble' before each exercise. And to affirm our fellow warriors with no pain, no gain," Globthor added proudly, their form accidentally spraying protein shake through their semi-permeable membrane. Sarah watched as the disguised aliens attempted to swagger into the gym, looking like a cross between a pride parade and a Richard Simmons video gone wrong. Through the window, she could see the front desk staff already reaching for their phones, no doubt about to make their facility TikTok famous. "Well," she muttered, following her charges inside, "at least they didn't bring the fungoid representative this time. We're still dealing with the spore situation from their last field study." The automatic doors closed behind them with what Sarah could have sworn was a sympathetic whoosh. "By the sacred nebula!" Professor Blurp's form rippled with alarm as they watched a human get body-slammed through what appeared to be a flimsy wooden table. "Their warriors show no mercy even to their furniture." Sarah sat between her alien charges in the front row of Monday Night Raw, already regretting every life choice that had led to this moment. The professor had insisted on documenting Earth's ritual combat theatre firsthand, and somehow managed to get clearance for front-row seats. Most fascinating, Blurp continued, frantically taking notes by forming tiny bubbles of text within their transparent body. The combatants appear to telegraph their attacks well in advance, yet their opponents seem unable to avoid them. Perhaps some form of psychic compliance is involved. It's choreographed, Sarah explained for the third time that evening. They're performing. It's like dance, but with more suplexes. Ah yes, Zixothiax chimed in, their crystalline form decorated with a foam finger that kept passing straight through them. The sacred combat dance. But why does the small angry one keep demanding to speak to the manager? On cue, heel wrestler Chad Thompson grabbed a microphone and started ranting about being disrespected. Sarah was about to explain the concept of wrestling personas when she noticed something alarming. Professor Blurp's form was beginning to extend over the safety barrier. Professor, no, she started, but it was too late. The Chad's rant about being the greatest technical wrestler alive was interrupted by a gelatinous pseudopod accidentally slapping the microphone from his hand. The stadium went silent. Oh dear, Blurp bubbled nervously, their form now fully visible to the cameras. I appear to have committed a faux pas. The Chad, ever the professional, didn't miss a beat. Well, what do we have here? Some kind of alien thinks they can step to the Chad? The crowd, already hyped up, went wild. Sarah could see the wrestling promoter at ringside, having what appeared to be a religious experience, as he watched the crowd's reaction. Blurp's vocoder crackled with uncertainty as they accidentally absorbed the microphone into their form. Their voice now boomed through the arena's speakers. I simply wished to inquire about your combat optimization techniques. The Chad, grinning like he'd just won the lottery, played it up. You want to learn about technique? How about I show you firsthand what happens to blob monsters who interrupt the Chad? Before Sarah could intervene, security guards were escorting their group backstage, not to kick them out, but to hastily sign Professor Blurp to a one-night appearance contract. This is highly irregular, Blurp bubbled excitedly as they were handed a hastily modified spandex outfit. But I suppose for the sake of thorough research. 20 minutes later, Sarah watched in horror as Professor Blurp made their professional wrestling debut under the name The Cosmic Jelly. Their entrance accompanied by laser lights that refracted magnificently through their translucent form. The properties of your species' entertainment are most perplexing, Zixothiax observed, as Blurp accidentally absorbed their opponent's first punch. Why does the audience chant, "This is awesome," when it is clearly a violation of several intergalactic peace treaties? Through the table! Minister Globethor had apparently gotten caught up in the moment, their form shifting colors in time with the crowd chants. The match ended when Blurp, attempting to execute a basic grappling move, accidentally engulfed the Chad entirely before quickly spitting him out. The crowd went absolutely berserk. I believe I have won the ritual combat, Blurp announced proudly as they returned to their seats, still wearing the custom spandex. Though I must admit, I remain confused about why the referee seemed so concerned about my use of tentacles. Professor, Sarah sighed as her phone began blowing up with notifications about the mysterious blob wrestler going viral. We need to have a serious discussion about maintaining our cover. Of course, Blurp agreed, their form still sparkling with excitement. But first, could you explain why various humans keep asking me to sign their Jelly 316 shirts? Note for the official record, Professor Blurp dictated, their form barely contained by a borrowed white guy. Earth warriors appear to have developed a combat style based entirely on aggressive cuddling. The small Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu academy was hosting what had to be its strangest fundamentals class ever. Sarah watched from the side as Professor Blurp, Counselor Zixothiax, and Minister Globethor attempted to follow along with the warm-up drills. Forward roll, called out Coach Marcus, trying very hard to maintain his professional demeanor, as Zixothiax literally rolled across the mat like a runaway disco ball, leaving tiny rainbow reflections in their wake. I fail to understand, Globethor whispered to Sarah, their gelatinous form wobbling with each shrimping drill. If two warriors are already this close, why not simply deploy traditional weapons? It's about control and technique, Sarah explained, watching as Professor Blurp accidentally flowed through their partner's guard like water. The goal is to submit your opponent without... Submit, Zix-Thiax's crystalline form chimed in alarm, causing several students to wince at the high-pitched sound. You mean they voluntarily practiced death scenarios? No one's dying, Sarah assured them. It's like competitive problem-solving with arm locks. Ah, Blurp nodded sagely, their head portion briefly separating from their body with the motion. Like the ancient Earth tradition of Twister we researched. Before Sarah could correct this misunderstanding, Coach Marcus called for everyone to pair up for guard-passing drills. A fresh-faced white belt, practically vibrating with enthusiasm, immediately made a beeline for Minister Globthor. "This'll be great," the white belt exclaimed. "I've been working on this move I saw on YouTube." "Perhaps we should start with something simpler," Sarah suggested quickly, but it was too late. What followed would later be described in Professor Blurp's official report as a chaotic intersection of enthusiastic incompetence and alien physiology. The white belt, attempting to execute a flying armbar they definitely weren't ready for, launched themselves at Minister Globthor's amorphous form. The minister, operating on instinct, split into 3 smaller pieces to avoid the attack. The white belt, now committed to their trajectory, sailed through the space where Globthor's arm should have been and crashed into Councillor Zix-Thiax, who promptly shattered into exactly 47 crystalline pieces. "Death ritual commenced," Blurp's vocoder shrieked in panic. Their form expanded rapidly, attempting to protect their fallen colleague by engulfing half the mat space. "Time out," Sarah called, rushing to help collect the scattered pieces of Zix-Thiax. "Everyone stay calm." "I'm so sorry," the white belt stammered, still tangled in their own gi. "I swear it looks easier in the videos." Coach Marcus, to his credit, handled the situation like he'd seen it all before. "Always protect your training partners," he advised the mortified white belt, "and maybe save the flying submissions for after you learn to fall properly." It took 20 minutes to reassemble Councillor Zix-Thiax, during which time Professor Blurp insisted on documenting what they called the human practice of voluntary discorporation. "Most enlightening," Blurp bubbled, their guy now somehow inside their transparent form rather than around it. "Humans intentionally place themselves in mortal peril to improve their technique?" "It's not mortal peril," Sarah insisted, helping Zix-Thiax reattach their last few facets. Look, humans just enjoy challenging themselves, okay?" By simulating death scenarios, Globthor noted, their 3 parts finally recombining into one skeptical mass. "By learning to overcome physical challenges in a controlled environment," Sarah corrected. "Through ritual combat cuddling," Zix-Thiax chimed, still slightly out of tune from their recent reconstruction. Sarah watched as the class continued, the aliens now giving the enthusiastic white belt a wide berth. On the mat, Coach Marcus was demonstrating a basic collar choke, causing all 3 observers to record frantic notes about humans teaching recreational asphyxiation techniques. "Perhaps," Professor Blurp suggested, their form thoughtfully rippling, "we should next investigate this yoga practice we've heard about. Surely that must be less violent than—" "No," Sarah interjected, having vivid flashbacks to the hot yoga incident. "I mean, maybe we should try something else, like watching a nice, safe boxing match." The aliens' various expressions of horror suggested this might have been the wrong alternative to suggest. Sarah realized her mistake the moment she found Professor Blurp vibrating at approximately 3,000 revolutions per minute next to the gym's smoothie bar, their gelatinous form having achieved a state that could only be described as protein shake hyperresonance. "I have consumed the warrior's elixir," the professor announced, their vocoder glitching from the vibrations. "I can taste colors and smell time." The MMA gym staff watched in bewilderment as the supposedly undercover alien delegation experienced their first collective pre-workout and protein shake buzz. Minister Globthor had turned a shocking shade of neon pink and was currently bouncing off the ceiling, literally, while shouting gains with each impact. "Is this normal?" asked Tommy, the gym's owner, watching Councillor Zix-Thiax attempt to bench press their own crystalline form. "Maximum power," Zix-Thiax chimed at a frequency that made nearby windows vibrate. "I have achieved what humans call the pump." It had started innocently enough. The aliens had arrived to observe a typical evening training session, taking careful notes about human combat practices. Then someone had offered them free samples of the gym's new pre-workout supplement. The label said extreme power, Blurp's report would later state, so naturally, we assumed it was some form of ancient berserker potion. Now Sarah watched in horror as three of the galaxy's most respected officials bounced around the gym in various states of supplement-induced mania. Globthor had discovered the speed bag and was attempting to match its rhythm by rapidly shifting colors, creating what looked like an impromptu rave in the corner. "My mitochondria are at maximum efficiency," Blurp announced, their form now somehow incorporating the amino acid chart from the wall into their internal structures. "I understand all things." "Should we call someone?" Tommy asked, ducking as Zixothiax attempted a spinning hook kick and sent crystal shards flying everywhere. "Behold my final form," Globthor declared, their gelatinous mass now shaped like what they apparently thought a bodybuilder looked like, which was basically just a cube with smaller cubes attached to it. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming priority message from the Galactic Council. Apparently, Blurp had somehow managed to file an emergency report, despite their current state. "Urgent alert, humans have developed chemical combat enhancements. Effects include time dilation, chromatic taste perception, spontaneous energy generation, possibly related to ancient berserker traditions. Current hypothesis, humans are actually living weapons. Additional note, everything is beautiful and nothing hurts. Supplementary note, maximum gains. Final note, witness me." "Perhaps," Sarah suggested to Tommy, watching Blurp attempt to spot Zixothiax on the bench press. Despite being essentially liquid, "we should have mentioned the recommended serving size." "I am become Gaines, destroyer of legs," Globthor announced, attempting to squat their own body weight, which kept changing as they shifted form. The situation reached its peak when all three aliens simultaneously discovered the pre-workout crash. Blurp's form suddenly deflated like a punctured water balloon, spreading across the gym floor in a thin film of exhausted protoplasm. Zixothiax's crystalline structure dimmed to a dull sparkle, and they slumped over the weight bench, mumbling about macronutrients. Globthor simply condensed into a small, dejected puddle that kept hiccuping protein shake bubbles. "Note for the final report," Blurp muttered weakly from their position on the floor. "Humans have developed sophisticated chemical warfare agents disguised as fitness supplements. Most insidious. Much respect, cannot feel face." "So, same time next week?" Tommy asked Sarah, helping her collect Zixothiax's scattered pieces again. "Never again," came three weak voices in unison. Sarah spent the next hour helping her charges recover while trying to explain that protein shakes weren't actually ancient warrior potions, and that the tingling sensation from pre-workout wasn't actually your soul ascending to the Gaines dimension. Although, she had to admit, watching Blurp slowly reconstitute themselves into a vaguely humanoid shape, that would explain a lot about gym culture. The next morning's official report to the Council was remarkably brief. "Humans are scarier than previously thought. Request immediate funding for further supplement research. P.S. Does anyone have any creatine?" The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council had never seen such a peculiar emergency session. For one thing, Professor Blurp's presentation kept being interrupted by junior staffers asking them to sign their "The Cosmic Jelly" merchandise. "As I was saying," Blurp bubbled, pausing to autograph a foam finger with their pseudopod, "our investigation has revealed disturbing— yes, I'll pose for a selfie after the session— disturbing patterns in human physical culture." The holoscreen displayed a montage of their investigations: the WWE incident, now with over 50 million views, the BJJ class disaster, and the protein shake aftermath, which had somehow also gone viral under #AlienGains. "Humans appear to have developed hundreds of different forms of recreational combat," Blurp continued, their forms still occasionally sparkling with residual pre-workout effects. "From boxing to something called pickleball, which we suspect involves weaponized preserves." High Chancellor Pixtar's eye stalks twisted in confusion. "But what is the military application, the strategic value?" "That's just it," Sarah interjected, rising from her seat. "There isn't any—" A shocked murmur rippled through the chamber. Even Professor Blurp's fan club fell silent. "Impossible," declared Minister Verloc. "All species develop physical training for practical purposes. My people's gravitational manipulation dances were developed for asteroid mining. The Zixothar's tentacle weaving was for deep space construction. Humans," Sarah explained, trying not to smile, "invented most of these activities for fun." The silence that followed was so profound that you could hear Councillor Zixothiax's crystals tinkling nervously. "Fun?" The High Chancellor's voice carried the same tone one might use for discussing quantum physics with a potato. "You mean to tell us that humans voluntarily engage in combat for entertainment?" Not just combat, Sarah continued. We'll turn anything into a competition. We race, we climb, we throw things, we hit things with other things, all because we enjoy it. But, Professor Blurp's form rippled with academic distress. What about the ritual combat theater where I became a minor celebrity? Professional wrestling, that's just storytelling with body slams. The council erupted into chaos. Representatives from various species began sharing their own physical traditions, each one tied to some crucial survival or military purpose. Our sonic resonance battles were developed to repel predators. The third moon dance of Kethor is a vital military training exercise. Even our younglings' gravity wells serve a defensive purpose. Sarah watched the confusion spread through the chamber. Then she got an idea. A wonderful, terrible, potentially career-ending idea. High Chancellor, she called out, silencing the chamber, would you like a practical demonstration? All 6 eye stalks swiveled toward her suspiciously. Explain. Sarah removed her formal diplomatic jacket, revealing the workout clothes she'd taken to wearing under her suits since this investigation began. A friendly boxing match, no stakes, no consequences, just fun. The chamber erupted again, this time in a mixture of horror and fascination. The High Chancellor's eye stalks weaved in complex patterns that the translator rendered as calculating political ramifications. You propose recreational combat with a High Chancellor of the Galactic Council. Unless you're scared, Sarah added, knowing exactly how to push alien diplomatic buttons. What followed would later be described in Professor Blurp's final report as a paradigm-shifting moment in interstellar relations, though the viral video would be titled Space Diplomat Boxes Squid Alien Gone Wrong, Gone Wholesome. The High Chancellor, after being shown proper stance and basic punches, discovered something unprecedented in their species' history. They were actually having fun. Their eye stalks bobbed and weaved as they threw hilariously telegraphed jabs, while Sarah playfully dodged and returned light taps. This is most irregular, they declared, failing to suppress what the translator identified as their species' equivalent of a giggle. But I begin to understand the appeal. The chamber watched in fascination as their most august leader engaged in what was essentially alien patty cake with boxing gloves. Other council members began calling out encouragement, forgetting their earlier horror in the face of this novel entertainment. Consider, Sarah said between playful exchanges, that humans invented hundreds of different ways to play, compete, and challenge ourselves, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. What does that tell you about us as a species? Professor Blurp's form rippled with sudden understanding. You're not training for war at all. You're training for joy. Exactly, Sarah grinned, demonstrating a slow-motion hook that the High Chancellor awkwardly but enthusiastically attempted to copy. We turned survival skills into games, combat into sport, and competition into celebration. Most fascinating, Blurp bubbled, their academic excitement causing them to accidentally absorb another fan's autograph request. This explains why the small human at the karate dojo was simultaneously crying and claiming to be having the best day ever after breaking a board. The session ended with an unprecedented scene, various council members tentatively trying out different human sports movements, from throwing mock punches to attempting cartwheels, with varying degrees of success depending on their physiological configurations. Perhaps, the High Chancellor declared, their eye stalks still bobbing enthusiastically, we have been too hasty in our judgment of human physical culture. I move to establish an interspecies recreational sports committee with Ambassador Chen as our advisor. Seconded, called Professor Blurp, who was already designing merchandise for what they called the Galactic Games. Sarah watched as the chamber descended into excited discussion about various sporting possibilities, including some physically impossible hybrid suggestions like zero-gravity underwater basketball and telepathic parkour. Just one condition, she added, catching the High Chancellor's eye: no protein shakes allowed in the first session. The 3 members of the investigation team shuddered in unanimous agreement. 6 months after the infamous council session, Sarah stood in the corner of what had to be the galaxy's most unusual powerlifting competition. The new Intergalactic Athletic Center, locally known as Blurp's House of Gains, was packed with spectators from 17 different species. Remember your form, she called out to Zixothiax, who was approaching the loaded barbell with determined sparkles glinting across their crystalline surface, and try not to shatter this time. I have optimized my lattice structure, Zixothiax chimed back, their form now sculpted into what they called their power crystal configuration. They were wearing a custom-made singlet that read, "Crystal Clear Gains" across the back. The crowd, a mix of humans and aliens, watched in fascination as Zixothiax approached the regional powerlifting record attempt. Professor Blurp, between signing autographs from their now legendary wrestling career, provided commentary through their vocoder. "Notice the excellent biomechanical adaptation," Blurp bubbled excitedly. "Counselor Zixothiax has developed a revolutionary technique of redistributing their crystalline mass during lifts. Most impressive for someone who, 6 months ago, thought deadlift meant resurrection." Sarah couldn't help but smile as she looked around the facility. The main gym floor hosted a bizarre but beautiful mix of interspecies athletics. A group of amorphous beings were discovering they had a natural talent for gymnastics, while some crystalline entities had formed a surprisingly competitive volleyball team. In the combat sports area, Minister Globethor, now a respected BJJ blue belt, was teaching a class on fluid dynamics grappling to a mixed group of gelatinous and solid-state students. Their motto, "Be water, my blob," had become surprisingly popular. "Lightweight," Zixothiax chimed, approaching the bar for their attempt at 500 earth pounds. Their crystalline form had developed distinct facets that eerily resembled human muscle groups. That's not how we use that phrase," Sarah started to explain, but was drowned out by the crowd's cheers. What followed would be viewed millions of times across both human and alien social media. Zixothiax, their form glowing with effort, lifted the weight in a technically perfect deadlift. At the top of the movement, they emitted a victory chime so pure that it brought tears to several species' visual organs. "New record," Professor Blurp announced, their form vibrating with excitement, "and not a single structural fracture." The celebration was interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. The High Chancellor had arrived for their weekly boxing lesson, but they weren't alone. They'd brought the entire Council Executive Committee. "We couldn't miss this historic moment," they explained, their eye stalks now sporting custom-made sweatbands. "Besides, some of us have been practicing that chest bump celebration humans do." "Maybe let's not," Sarah started, but it was too late. The resulting collision of various alien physiologies created what witnesses would later describe as a celebration supernova, complete with crystalline chimes, gelatinous splashes, and at least one accidentally triggered bioluminescent display. As the chaos settled, Professor Blurp gathered everyone for an announcement. Their form, now permanently tinted with pre-workout residue, despite Sarah's warnings, rippled with pride. "When we first investigated human warrior culture, we thought we were documenting a violent species. Instead, we discovered something far more remarkable, a species that turned the struggle for survival into a celebration of life." Sarah watched as Zixothiax posed for photos with their new trophy, which they had accidentally partially absorbed into their crystal matrix in excitement, while the High Chancellor demonstrated their improving jab technique to other council members. "Also," Blurp added, "our new merchandise line drops next week. The Cosmic Gains collection includes gravity-defying workout gear for all forms of matter." The facility had become more than just a gym. It was a testament to humanity's strangest and most wonderful gift to the galaxy, the ability to turn anything, even the serious business of physical training, into play. "Next up," Sarah announced, checking her schedule, "beginner's yoga class. And this time," she added firmly, looking at Minister Globethor, "no one is allowed to achieve enlightenment through unauthorized fusion with their yoga mat." The minister's form rippled sheepishly as several other aliens nodded in agreement, all of them sporting Namaste Space Cowboy shirts from the gift shop. The galaxy, it seemed, had finally learned to play.